Hey everyone, welcome to another Patreon topic video. This one is for RetroShmuper, and it's a topic that I feel very suited to answer. And the question is simply, why do players love Cave so much? Why do people like Cave as much as they do? You know, what's with all the hype? And I think it's hard to deny, if you're a shmup fan, you are gonna hear about Cave. And in fact, Cave is so popular among shmup players that it is possible that even casual people who don't know about pretty much any other studio besides Treasure and Ikaruga, right, will know about Cave and Cave games. So I thought it'd be a great topic to discuss and try and get into more of the nuanced things that I can think of rather than just the obvious stuff. But I guess let's start with the obvious stuff. Why do people like Cave so much? Well, the obvious answer is just the game design is so well done. It's so strong. Cave games are amazingly high quality shmups, and in fact I know there are people who aren't the biggest Cave fans, that Cave annoys them a little bit, but I think even these people would be hard pressed to say that these games are not of high quality, that they're not well designed, well implemented. And the thing about Cave games is sometimes they're not perfectly balanced, sometimes they're not perfectly without their jank. Dodonpachi is a great example of this, but the fun factor too really pushes them into something that players keep coming back to over and over. I know when I was playing Dodonpachi for the 2-all, there were times where, especially in like 2-3 and stuff, where you feel like this game is so jank at moments, it's so unfair, but overall the game is just so strong and keeps you coming back, to where you'll sometimes look over some of their less kind design aspects, like the final attack speed being random and stuff like that. But anyway, speaking of Cave more broadly though, one thing that I think is underestimated about why Cave's so liked is that they're prolific. They kept these games coming, and they kept them coming at a high quality. I think people underestimate that aspect of the genre, of the studio. Yes, when you focus in individually on their games, their individual games, many of them are just straight up classics. Some of the best shmups ever made. Ketsui, Futari, DOJ, DDP to a little bit of a lesser extent. These games are just absurdly good individually, but what makes Cave so interesting is they just kept them coming. You know, the output from this studio is absurd, especially by today's standards. So what I love about shmup studios, and what I love about the genre, is they are not like how game developers are these days, where they release a game once every 6 years and then just kind of milk it for you know, DLC, this and that, and they kind of just fatten out the experience. Whereas Cave games, they give you discrete games, and they iterate upon each other, and they keep them coming. Kind of like Mega Man back in the day, but I think a little better than that formula, because Mega Man games can start to blend together. But Cave games, especially even within their own series, do not blend together. You know, you're not going to play Donpachi, then Dodonpachi, then DOJ and feel like, oh, these games are exactly the same. Each one definitely delivers something new, definitely changes up the gameplay. And in fact, though, what's interesting about Dodonpachi and DOJ is, if you play a lot of Dodonpachi, you can see a lot of Dodonpachi within DOJ, down to aesthetics, like certain textures and stuff from Dodonpachi are in DOJ, or like in Stage 5, where Stage 5 is a boss rush of all the bosses from Dodonpachi, just kind of thrown into the last stage of DOJ. You know, all that stuff, and you can tell Stage 5 is like a rework of Stage 1 as far as the level design and stuff. But it all works, it all iterates upon itself really well. And also what makes Cave really cool is they got a little bit experimental too at times, like Gwenge, Dangun Feverun. They stepped out of the mold. And that's an interesting period in Cave's development, Pro Gear, where they do kind of offer a lot for lots of different players. So if you want kind of the classic standby series, Dodonpachi, Futari, you know, the Mushi series, Ketsui, even though it's a one game. And then you have, if you have more eclectic tastes, you know, they have Gwenge, they have Dangun Feverun, Pro Gear, Kai Katana. So they have these spin-off series, And then there's the Esperade, and then the Espgaluda series. They just really kept it fresh and kept adding in new ideas, they were just on their game, basically. I feel like a studio that's pretty similar to Cave, but the difference is they didn't quite have the same level of quality, is Psycho Games, and I'm sure that's going to piss off all them Psycho fans. And there are some amazingly good Psycho games, and in fact, the hard thing about shmups is if you like a certain style of shmup better than another style, then you can't really argue which one is better than the other. If you're a big Psycho fan, you could argue that Psycho games are better than Cave games for XY reasons, right? But I think, unlike Psycho, Cave has kind of done a better job of appealing to larger amounts of people, larger groups. And that's what I think why Cave is so popular, and why, it can be frustrating for some people who like specific games, and yet everyone just wants to talk about Cave all day. And I even said on the first episode of the podcast, hey, just letting you all know, I'm a big Cave fan, and I know some people around, the shmup scene tire of Cave talk and want to talk about other games, which I do as well. But I'm not going to pretend like I don't like Cave games, because I absolutely do. And so there is that factor that Cave does tend to dominate a lot of the conversation. But I think the reason why is because they just appeal to so many different players for so many different reasons. They have so many different games, and then within the games, they also have very nice widestream appeal. For instance, the visuals are very strong. And then when you compare something like Toho to something like Cave, Cave's art styles are just more widely appealing than Toho art styles. I mean, I've run into that again and again. And this isn't me trying to diss on Toho, but I'm saying, if you're wondering why more people tend to gravitate towards Cave within at least the arcade scene, because I know Toho is amazingly popular, but it's just they have a more wide-reaching aesthetic, and then the gameplay itself is also kind of like that as well, where Cave's gameplay is hard to pin down necessarily. Yes, it's a bullet hell, but it's not as bullet helly as people tend to think it is. People tend to view Cave games as, sort of along the lines of Toho, which they do become, especially in SDOJ in the later releases. But in the Donpachi, DOJ, Ketsui era, it kind of has that nice blend where it does have a lot of classic style stuff in there with the level design, where, especially with chaining and stuff, where you have to really be precise with your shots. It's not just all about dodging. So it has that kind of middle ground game design where classic people can get into it, and then straight up Danmaku bullet hell people can get into it. It's that nice blend there. So that's why I think Cave is so popular, is it just broadly appeals to most shmup players. And then the quality of the games is very, very high, to where even people who don't like Cave games or are annoyed by their popularity, it's going to be hard to argue that they're not well-made, well-designed games. And again, they do have some jank, there's no denying that, but within that jank, the good definitely outweighs the bad. I'm trying to think of a bad Cave game, or Cave game that I don't think is very good. Nothing particular is coming to mind. There's the Black Sheep, right? B-Storm, Donpachi 2 B-Storm, which wasn't made by Cave, it was made by a different studio. I think it was a Korean studio. The funny thing about B-Storm, though, is even though B-Storm definitely is not as strong as the mainline Cave-developed games, it is still a pretty fun game. It still has its own charms, and I kind of think of it like one of the best ROM hacks ever, because that's kind of how it feels. It feels like someone ROM hacked Donpachi and made B-Storm, but even that game I think is pretty great. I guess like Death Smiles 2 is kind of like... Again though, I didn't even mention Death Smiles, right? So we're talking about wide appeal, right? Well, if you want that kind of Toho aesthetic moe stuff, Death Smiles got it for you. So they really are branching out, and I think even the later Donpachi games like SDOJ and DFK and a little bit of DOJ have some moe aspects with their Exodolls and all those sorts of things. So I think hopefully this kind of explains why Cave is so widely liked and so widely known. Again, it's kind of those things where I could see people getting a little bit bent out of shape about it because they are so dominant. And the thing about shmups that's important to kind of understand, and I'm hoping moving forward, there's some things we can do to kind of break this problem. But the problem with playing shmups is that for most players, it's kind of better to gravitate towards the already popular games. So that also helps improve Cave's popularity, right? Where, for instance, I played Danmaku Unlimited 3, Kiwi plays Blue Revolver. I'm going to start playing some more Zero Ranger. So these are well-liked games for sure, but they don't have that massive history among the player base and among scoring and strategy guides and all those sorts of things like most Cave games do. And so what ends up happening is when people get into shmups, if you want to play for score, you're wanting your fellow players to kind of value what you're doing, right? You want your fellow players to see or kind of understand what you're working on. So that's again another reason why Cave games are so popular, is because the player base, it's like a common tongue between all of us, right? We all understand Cave, we all understand how it works, we all understand what makes it good, we all understand it. So that when you get 500 million in Ketsui or 600 million in Donanpachi, everyone universally understands that is a good score, you are a good player. We can all understand that. But I get 3 billion or 5 billion in a Danmaku Unlimited 3. What's the difference between 3 billion and 5 billion? Most people have no idea, even really good players. It's like, well, what's the difference? There's not that common understanding. Same thing with, new indie games coming out. And that's the tough thing that has to be built up over time. So that's why games like Garega, the Cave games, I'm trying to think of like a classic game. The Psycho games, maybe something like Strikers 1945-2. Those games have a foundation of players, and so when you come into the genre and you want your fellow players to understand what you're doing, to understand your skill set, Cave and Rising and all those kinds of popular, great shmups are attractive because you feel like, yes, people can understand what I'm up to, people can get into it. Whereas if you're playing a very obscure shmup that a lot of people may not know about, it's like basically you learning some language that no one speaks. Where it's like, okay, cool, but we can't really relate to that. That's something that I want to change. That's not a good thing. I like the idea of people playing, especially with new indie games coming out, right? That's another struggle for indie games, because no one's freaking playing them because they don't have that recognition. So that's hard to break into. And I think there are things the shmup scene can do. Maybe that'll be another topic video, right? Of how to break into scoring with the player base so more players will play your game, basically. So anyway, I think that hopefully explains why Cave is so popular and how it kind of reinforces itself because of its history. And so I'd like to end by thanking my patrons. So I had to write these down on a paper plate because I'm out of paper at my home. Dingo, DBL Vision, Dunpeel 2064, Full Set, RetroShmuper, man of the video, Gus, Himmel, Kiwi, Jake Ryan, Joe Angelo, K, Kino Tozy, and tell me if that's wrong, Kino. Kino Tozy, Mark Sloan, Maz, Nathaniel Davis, N Electron, Psych, Plasmo, Young Money Sweet. Thanks for watching.